Reboot YouTube. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Is YouTube working yet? Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. It seems like it should be good now. Thank you very much, you guys. We have had some crazy technical difficulties, and it's not my fault. It is software related. It's on the back end of Rumble, but looks like everybody is online now. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay. So getting back to my comments to my friend Wes. All right, so he said that Trump's speech was nothing. There was no evidence in Trump's speech. And this is a familiar trap that I expect to see the left falling into on a regular basis. A speech, of course, is only a 10-minute opportunity to go over findings at a high level. I don't know if people truly expected President Trump to get up there and present a dissertation-level examination of all of these specific instances of election fraud that took place. I think that would be self-defeating. What they did was release 10 million plus pages of previously unseen information from within the American intelligence community, which, when you look at that data, does prove that a whole bunch of different things were happening, that you had members of the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA, and of course CISA and many other intelligence agencies who directly withheld information from the president, proof of foreign election interference, while at the same time they were carnival barking nonstop about Russia and their foreign election interference. Of course, there is much, much more, but my point ultimately was that the evidence is in the release. It's like somebody getting up there on stage and just saying John F. Kennedy was assassinated and we have an idea of who did it. All you got to do is go do the work. And there you go. You go look at the JFK files and you can find the evidence in there. Somebody delivering a speech is not the same thing as somebody presenting a case. And it's very disingenuous when people try to use that as an excuse to say that there was nothing to that speech. There was a hell of a lot to that speech. Very consequential information that was delivered in that speech if you were open and willing to hear it and understand where you go to get the finer details of it. Before we really dive into that subject and many more on today's show, let me say thank you to Eleanor2000. She says, just a little something to bless you and Lisa, perhaps add to the honeymoon fund. I really do appreciate you. Thank you so much, Eleanor. Also, Filter Dog says technical blessings. Thank you for that, my friend. All right, let us begin, first of all, with something humorous. I thought that this was great. It really does encapsulate what I think a lot of guys are like when they're at home and, you know, interacting with their wives. One time I was laughing at something that I was playing on the stream and somebody in the chat said, Zach, are you only finding things funny when they're offensive or when somebody gets hurt? And I was like, no, but it doesn't hurt for it to be funny. It definitely actually makes it even funnier, although there's all kinds of things that I find funny. But anyways, this is a little skit that I saw on X when your girlfriend discovers your real sense of humor. Take a listen.
I just went through your DMs. What the f***?
Babe, I can explain.
It's all Epstein and Charlie Kirk, and I saw an AI of George Bush with Down syndrome.
It's just comedy.
But it's not funny.
Not to you. Take a seat. Every straight man is cursed with a horrible sense of humor. We can only find things funny if there's a victim in it, preferably a minority.
But all the memes you send me are cute dogs and couples.
We like that too, but I can't send that to our friends.
But not every straight man. What about my brother and my dad and sweet old Mr. Jenkins who feeds the ducks in the park?
Yes, every straight man. And the ones who don't find this stuff funny are gay. Not that there's anything wrong with that. They just don't know it yet.
I wish I'd never seen this side of you.
We're all terrible people. Every single one. I have 2 pills. One will wipe your memory of this incident forever, and only this memory. And the other is a gummy bear. I know you like those.
Have we done this before?
Do you want to know?
Oh my god, babe, look at this dog.
Oh my god, that's hilarious.
Oh, it's so good and so true. Oh, that's why I love it. Okay. Now, also, next, I have an update for you on the dust-up on X between my Congressman Randy Fine and Alex Brusewitz, an advisor to the Trump administration. I am happy to report that Alex is happy to tell you that he and Randy Fine had a very productive 15-minute conversation earlier today. In that conversation, they kissed and made up. Randy admitted that Alex isn't just a Jew hater, and Alex admitted that as long as Randy can be on his best behavior and support the Trump administration, then they can agree to disagree on a number of things. Now, of course, they probably disagree on a number of things that, Randy would hope that Alex was going to feel differently about. But this is America, baby. And the Republican Party is not a monolithic mindset. There are issues that we can disagree politely on, policies that we can believe should be different, and we will fight for those things and we will argue our case. But that doesn't mean that we need to start canceling people and getting people fired. That, my friends, is retarded. Representative Fine has agreed to continue to vote yes for President Trump's agenda. I got to be honest, as I've said before, that's all I need from him. His actual personal affect, maybe the things that I don't like about him, those are personal things, and I am not going to. I'm not going to stop supporting the president because I don't like a couple of things that the guy tweeted. I just got to be honest with you guys about how I feel. He also made it clear that he realizes that Alex is not some Jew hater who's out to just put 6 million people in an oven. Politics is a team sport. Alex says the Republican Party is big enough to include those who are strongly pro-Israel as well as those who prefer less foreign involvement, but the party must always remain America first. There's just no way around it. You're going to have people who want Israel to do what Israel is going to do, and then you're going to have a lot of people who don't want Israel to have anything to do with American politics. That's where I land on this issue. And as long as congressmen are not making decisions that affect Americans' lives with the intention of doing so to further the nation of Israel, then I think that we're going to be fine. But as soon as they start doing that, people need to primary them. That is where I lie on this issue. Now, I also have a very heartwarming update on a story that I brought to you maybe a month or two ago. Do you guys remember that elderly man in Arizona who was being kicked out of his home through eminent domain by Arizona State University? They had forced him into a court battle, lengthy, very expensive. And it was basically to the point where he was going to have to move and they were going to tear his house down, and then they were going to put up a soulless, brutalist style office building where they were probably going to dissect babies. Well, this 89-year-old man just had his home saved, not only by the intervention of President Trump, but also as his envoy for American landowners, the one and only John Rich. John Rich actually went to Arizona, went to bat for this American on behalf of President Trump because President Trump told him to go fix this, and Arizona State University caved. And they are also looking at paying for his legal bills. This was a major win for this man and for America.
Over the property. But 89-year-old Robert Young, who has owned the home since 1975, has something to say about it.
It's not going to happen. And that's what I thought then, and that's what I think today. I will not let it happen.
Young says he and his wife lived in the home for 8 years before renting it out. He calls it an architectural and historic treasure that's irreplaceable. The legal battle taking a toll on him and his wife.
It's stressful. You don't know from day to day if you're going to find the house on the corner.
Young says the university offered him between $290,000 and almost $1 million for his home. Maricopa County Superior Court records show the Arizona Board of Regents sued Young for his home earlier this month. Shore says the home doesn't need to come down and has a vision for the home and the medical school.
There's nothing more sustainable than keeping a house where it is. Create a pocket park around it so that way people can come and enjoy that little pocket park and make it really a gem in the community.
Shore says there's a petition online with over 10,000 signatures. Young wants ASU and people to know it's more than just a house.
It's the way it's placed on the corner, and it's the fact that this corner itself is historic.
Absolutely can, and that they can withdraw from the court proceedings for eminent domain. Spoke with Mr. Young and told him that, and he was to say excited would be an understatement, almost in disbelief that he will be able to keep his home and finish the rest of his life where he wants to be, owning that home. So thank you to Dr. Crow. Thank you to ASU for taking the meeting. We had a couple of weeks to discuss this. And Mr. Young, congratulations, sir. You can keep your home right where it's at. I also asked Dr. Crow if ASU could look at reimbursing Mr. Young for his legal expenses that he's had to basically burn through retirement money to battle ASU. Dr. Crow said we will absolutely take a look at that. So I really hope that happens as well. Make this man whole on what he's had to spend in court. Again, these are the kinds of things I do with this position that President Trump gave me as special envoy for American landowners. There's no situation too big and there's no situation too small. If you are an American landowner, you have rights and you are someone that I care about and that the president cares about. So, Mr. Young, we took care of you, sir, and keep me posted on how things go. Again, lastly, one more time, big shout out to Dr. Crow, the president of Arizona State University, for having a heart and a soul and seeing this from Mr. Young's perspective. I couldn't ask for more. I really do appreciate it. Big win for American landowners today. And you guys keep sending in your stories, filling out reports at usda.gov/lawfare. We will take a look at your story as well. God bless you. God bless America. Have a great day.
God bless both President Trump and John Rich. I mean, I don't know anything about John Rich's music. I don't listen to country. I'm not going to lie to you. I couldn't tell you a John Rich song. I have only seen John Rich in terms of his commentary and his support of President Trump, so I really respect him for that. And I just want to say, tell me another moment in American history where a president stepped in to advocate for a landowner in an eminent domain dispute. Never before in history has this happened. President Trump is already the busiest man on planet Earth. And here he is going out and sending his emissary to try to make sure that this elderly man who loves this home, this historic piece of Arizona history, remains where it's been for the better part of a century or more. It's an absolutely incredible story. It makes you feel so good. And it lets you know that no problem is too big, no problem is too small. If it's something that affects Americans, President Trump is going to be there and he's going to advocate for you. Zach, you mean you've never heard Save a Horse, Ride a Cowboy? I mean, I've heard of that song. I didn't know that was John Rich, but no, I've never heard that song before. No. And I've never watched The Celebrity Apprentice either. I didn't have cable for years, guys. So even when The Apprentice was on, I was aware of it, but I never saw it. So, yeah, anyways, very, very cool. Love to see it. All right, now, strangely enough, I don't know if we've got another body that we can add to the Clinton body count list, but we do have the death of a federal judge, the man that was appointed by Bill Clinton, which is coming very interestingly just a couple of days after he released a Cuban hijacker. Now, this Cuban hijacker was in the middle of deportation proceedings, and the passing of this Clinton-appointed federal judge very shortly after this release is definitely something that was unexpected. Thank you to the Colonel's Corner. I love you, Colonel Towner. Thank you so much. Appreciate the raid. Thank you very much. Principled Enigma says, what a delightful thing to hear. I'm glad POTUS stepped in to help save this man's home. God bless him. And again, when is your anniversary? March 10th. March 10th. So we passed it this year. We had our 1 year anniversary, and we're going to have our another one next year. All right. Now, the New York Post is reporting that a legal source in Miami, also a law clerk for this chief judge, Marsha Morales Howard, I'm sorry, it's a woman, Marsha Morales Howard, she's in the Middle District of Florida, confirmed that senior district judge John E. Steele passed away at the age of 77. Judge Steele, dying after having been appointed by Bill Clinton, of course, is now going to leave an opening for President Trump to appoint a judge in his place. We don't know what his cause of death is yet. And yes, I do believe, and, you know, pardon me for speculating on adding a body to the Clinton body count. But, you know, anytime you've got anybody who's connected to the Clintons, I feel like it's just something you got to bring up. I mean, there have been a lot of deaths surrounding Bill and Hillary Hillary Clinton. Back on July 8th is when Steele had allowed the release of this Cuban plane hijacker. His name was Michael Guerrero Morales. He was in ICE custody. Now, the agency took him into custody back in December of last year, and they intended to deport him to Mexico. Why was Guerrero Morales a dangerous criminal illegal alien? Well, he took over a Cuban commuter plane back in 2003 and then forced the crew to fly in and land at Key West International Airport. Now, he spent over 20 years in prison for aircraft piracy and conspiracy to interfere with a flight crew. Despite all of these facts, Steele said this Cuban native must be released from supervision of ICE. And that means that agents would then have to try to monitor him and follow him around until they got to the point where they could go ahead and deport him. From what Steele said, they claim that ICE could not send Guerrero Morales back to Cuba because of an anti-torture convention that's in place. And so the agency had provided no evidence that he had communicated with Mexico about sending him there. Now, following this ruling by Steele, Representative Greg Stube from down here in Florida filed an article of impeachment against him. And the House resolution presented by the congressman alleged this judge had committed high crimes and misdemeanors. This is exactly the kind of activist judicial overreach the American people are sick of, Stube said. Judge Steele had every legal justification to keep a convicted plane hijacker off of our streets, and he chose to let him go instead. I agree with what Greg Stube did, and I think that we have far more people who need to be impeached across the federal bench. Now, the Department of Homeland Security had their own words for the judge. The scathing response they published stated that this activist judge forced ICE to release a criminal illegal alien who was convicted and sentenced to 22 years for hijacking a plane back into American communities. This is yet another example of an activist judge trying to thwart President Trump's mandate from the American people to remove criminal illegal aliens from our country. Under President Trump and Secretary Mullen, DHS will continue to fight for the detention and removal of criminal illegal aliens who have no right to be in our country. We need to get as many of them out as we possibly can. Also, just on the subject of the deportations of criminal illegal aliens, Secretary of DHS Mark Wayne Mullen announced earlier today that deportations are now at over 3 million. The last time we heard about them, they were over 2 million. So they have been going at quite a clip. And the daily average deportations have definitely increased, despite the sort of maybe weak-kneed affect that people have thought that Mark Wayne Mullen has taken and after that sort of disastrous memo that he sent out ordering ICE agents to stop pulling people over before President Trump said that's actually not going to fly. We're going to go ahead and get these people out of here. Now, we do now have video evidence of that bomb blast in Monaco that was targeting a Ukrainian billionaire, Vadim Ermolov. He was visiting Monaco with his wife and his 13-year-old child, and as they were walking into this hotel, a backpack bomb blew up. Now, what we are going to see, and well, first let me say, I don't know where this camera came from. It almost looks as if the Ukrainian intelligence services placed a camera in a location so that they could make sure that the woman who placed the bomb, who had been hired by a Ukrainian spy, that they would see her place the bomb, and then they would see the family go into the hotel and know that they had been successfully blown up. By the size of this blast, I am shocked that anybody survived. Now, I haven't heard of anybody dying. Of course, his wife did lose both her legs. Very, very tragic. She's lucky to be alive. As far as I'm aware, the child is alive as well. And of course, the Ukrainian billionaire is alive. He's also speaking about who he thinks committed this act against him and his family, this overt act of terrorism. We'll hear from him in just a moment. But take a look at this explosion. Absolutely crazy. So what you have here in the background is the family. This person walking out is the woman who set the bomb. She was dressed as a man. She's walking down this corridor here on the street alleyway. And then the man, the billionaire, his wife and child walk into the hotel. And almost as soon as they walk in, the bomb goes off. Oof. Almost as soon as they walk in, the bomb goes off. And I think that her making that phone call was the trigger signal to explode that bomb. Again, the size of that blast, the concussive force, I can't believe anybody's alive. That was absolutely crazy. Now, the victim, the man, Vadim, he is coming out and saying, you know what? I have no doubt in my mind. This was the Ukrainian security services. It's been about 2 weeks since he and his family were targeted with that backpack bomb. And he sent out a statement adding pressure on the Kiev regime. He's pointing to the Ukrainian intelligence services as being behind the attack. This was, in fact, the very first terrorist attack in the history of Monaco. And the businessman who was sanctioned by Kiev said that there was no doubt the serving officers of the main intelligence directorate of the Military of Defense of Ukraine, GUR, are involved in the attempt on my life. Now, what we know about the woman who placed the bomb is that she was hired by a member of the GRU. He admitted to it after he shot her in the head and then buried her in a shallow grave. He also apparently had a helper who is also in the GRU, but they wanted to make everybody very, very sure that the higher-ups in the GRU knew nothing about it. So the Telegraph reported the property magnate was approaching the building with his long-term partner and their 13-year-old son when the explosives hidden in a backpack at the threshold of the lobby were detonated on the evening of June 29th. Ermolov's partner lost both her feet. I'm sorry, not her legs, her feet, while his son sustained burns, fractures, and severe trauma. I remain in intensive care and am only now beginning the long process of recovery, he added. This is his first public statement since the bomb went off. And, of course, it wasn't long before the French police identified Ukrainian female Anastasia Bereskova as the attacker. And, of course, she was found dead, shot to death near Kiev after escaping Monaco on July 1st. Vladislav Rut, who is the GRU officer, and Vitaly Zakovich, a former member of the SBU, were both arrested. The reason they know they are directly connected, besides them just saying we hired her and then, albeit, for no reason, we decided to shoot her, they had already sent her a number of financial transactions, cryptocurrency payments that they made to her. And they believe, obviously, that this was payment for what they did when she placed that bomb. Now, the prosecutors in Ukraine have tried to say that the murder was the work of rogue operators without authorization from their agencies. But Ermolov, of course, does not believe that. In a statement distributed by his lawyers, he says he's pretty sure that the order for the attack on his family came from a lot higher up than just these rogue intelligence agents. According to the evidence currently available, the conspiracy extended beyond the direct perpetrators and organizers to include serving HUR officers connected to them, including individuals close to the agency's current and former leadership. This was not a warning. It was an attempt to kill not only me, but my family as well. Now, the incident was a matter of international security and trust in public institutions. If serving officers of an intelligence agency used their positions, resources, or networks to orchestrate the attempted murder of a family on European soil, then this is no longer merely a crime against my family. And that is exactly what I argued on the day that this happened. The fact that, of course, there has never been a terrorist attack on Monaco soil, and combined with the fact that Ukraine has been stepping up their attacks on foreign soil in recent years, leads me to believe that the patience with Ukraine is beginning to wear down with a lot of European leaders. They've already pulled back from their support of this war, and I feel that we haven't come to a peace agreement yet only because Volodymyr Zelensky doesn't want peace. He continues to shuffle his government around. There are currently protests that are taking place in Ukraine. People are not happy with him. They still don't have an election. And until something like the removal of Volodymyr Zelensky happens, unfortunately, I don't think that the people of Ukraine are going to get any respite. Let me say thank you. Oh, thank you very much to Patel Patriot for rating the stream as well. Appreciate you, John. Thank you to Red Pill 78 Wife. Our anniversary is, what is it? It's not March 10th. Is it March 9th? What the hell? Or is it March 8th? Shit, I don't know. It's in my calendar. Honey, tell me what the day is. I could have sworn that it was the 10th. Let's see. Jim Kyle says, I saw a piece with Overstock former owner Byrne today where he said he was part of a sting to get Hillary taking a bribe for $18 million, but he was told to do it by the DOJ because she was going to be president. That's correct. He said the same thing on my channel when I interviewed him a couple of years ago. Teresa Pagano says, Zach got his anniversary wrong. LOL. By the way, Greg Stube is pronounced Stu B. Hashtag Hashtag flow grown. It's a native thing. Okay. Greg Stubbe. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay. Hold on. I gotta look in my phone. I mean, I have to be honest. I might have it in here incorrectly. Oh my God, it's the 8th. It's the 8th. It's March 8th. Okay. Sorry, babe. I love you. It is March 8th. Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely in the doghouse now. Oh, I'm glad John was here to witness that one. I'm never going to hear the end of it. Jim Kyle, $50 for the anniversary fund. Thank you very much, Jim. I appreciate you. P. Quest, thank you very much for the cookie. Boys Blanc, thank you for the cookie. No thanks, Joe. Thank you for the cookie. Thank you, Lisa and Zach. Happy Friday to you both. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you guys next week. Yes, we will be there. Definitely. Okay, so I feel bad for this dude's wife. I mean, losing both her feet. Obviously, what are your legs worth if you don't have the feet? Obviously, they can do, like prosthetic feet. They could give her leg braces or something, but just good God, I mean, it's going to be a struggle, uphill battle. All right, so yesterday, before President Trump's speech, historic speech at the White House, Tom Tillis took it upon himself to go on a rampage on the floor of the Senate, this long-winded rant, essentially arguing against the Save America Act, talking about how it's a waste of time for anybody to ever think that supporting the Save America Act might be a good idea. Now, the reason he is so angry and speaking so loudly about this is because, we'd already said this, but the House successfully passed the Save America Act as part of a national security bill. And then again on Thursday, the Budget Committee advanced the Save America Act and the Protect America Act through the budget reconciliation process, which means that in the Senate, that now only requires 50 votes plus J.D. Vance, and they'll be able to get it passed through. So the House Budget Committee also advanced a framework for a third reconciliation bill. So now there are 3 new opportunities in the Senate, and if they continue to block all of them, well, President Trump said it himself last night. The only reason you don't want election security is because you're cheating. So the reconciliation strategy is designed to allow that measure to pass the Senate with that simple majority that I mentioned, rather than the traditional 60 votes, which is required to overcome the filibuster. But Senate rules will ultimately determine which provisions qualify. And of course, the Senate parliamentarian is going to be the one who decides on that. But as we saw yesterday, coming from Based Mike Lee, the word and decisions of the Senate parliamentarian are not set in stone. This is not something that John Thune must abide by. The Senate parliamentarian is merely an advisory position. She has zero power. Unless, for some strange reason, she has Thune by the balls and we don't know about it. But Tillis is still bitter. He's angry because President Trump wouldn't support him. He's bitter because people hate him. He's bitter because his own constituents were not going to vote for him, and so that meant that he knew it was not worth another humiliating run for a role that he was probably going to be voted out of. So he has spent this entire year blocking everything that President Trump wants to do. So on the floor, he said, if I see a reconciliation bill come from the House with another failed attempt to confuse this election, I will use every device I have available to slow down the wheels of government until people cop a clue and do the math. Well, if it's reconciliation and it only requires a simple majority and they can do the 51 votes, it's not failed, Tom Tillis. It doesn't mean that it's failed. We can actually get this passed. He said, I've been trying to explain for nearly a year that the SAVE Act, whether it's the SAVE Act, the Save America Act, the new SAVE legislation that's being proposed in the House, SAVE goes to Hollywood, SAVE goes to Hawaii, whatever the sequels are, all of them are fundamentally flawed and impossible to implement by this election. And, of course, he is mocking President Trump. Now, President Trump has, for a long time, repeatedly called on both the House and the Senate to get some type of provision to just verify that the people who are voting are the people they say they are. Verify that those people who say they are American citizens are also actually American citizens. A requirement for voter ID should be something that no one opposes, is virtually something that all Americans agree with. And it seems like the only people who have a problem with it are people in the Senate like Tom Tillis. The White House has repeatedly put out numbers showing that more than 70% of Americans support this particular bill. And as people in the Senate and the House work for Americans, then I think that their votes should largely depend upon what that sentiment is. It's not a failed bid just because Tom Tillis says that it is. And when we take a look at the specifics of President Trump's speech from last night, the passage of the Save America Act becomes an even more vital linchpin in ensuring that our elections are secure moving forward. So let's go through some of the high level and most important aspects of the president's speech last night. As I said, over 10 million pages of intelligence documents have now been declassified and released. This is all part of the effort that John Solomon has undertaken through his hiring as a special government employee by President Trump and the White House. Now, these documents include things that have never been seen before, but also will include some things that you will find familiar because I've already reported on them here on this show in the past. But make no mistake, with 10 million documents, there is plenty of information in this release, which people are now going to be able to dive into and use as an argument as to why our elections are fake and gay and need to be fixed. So out of these 10 million documents, you're going to look at emails, you're going to have text messages, you're going to have memos and intelligence product that are produced by the CIA or the FBI or the NSA. All of it, though, however, has one thing in common, and that is the fact that U.S. elections are not secure. U.S. elections are compromised. And as we move towards the midterms in November, U.S. elections continue to be compromised as they exist in their current incarnation. As we all know, because we've been yelling it from the rooftops for years, our elections are broken. The methods of voting are broken. The so-called security measures that are in place are not secure, and they are intentionally placed in that manner so that people can cheat, and people that we do not want representing us in the House and the Senate end up in those positions, and they get fantastically wealthy and then laugh at us from their ivory towers on the East and West Coast. So some of the most important elements of President Trump's speech last night. Number one, Chinese election interference. Now, one of the important things is that China is a lot like the United States. It's a lot like any of these countries. You're going to have a good portion of the Chinese government. You're going to have a bad portion of the Chinese government. Both of them may be aligned in the interest of China as a country and China and their citizens. But that doesn't mean that both sides of the coin are willing to do terrible, illegal things or meddle in American elections. However, somebody in China definitely breached our U.S. voter rolls, and somebody in China, President Trump identified them as a special intelligence unit, stole the identities of 220 million registered American voters. And those identities have been used repeatedly to exploit the U.S. election system since 2020. Now, U.S. election officials interfered in President Trump's ability to address this issue because they intentionally covered up the fact that there was any breach by China. From January 2020 until June of 2026, they refused to give President Trump this information. Not only did they not give the information to President Trump, but they also failed to brief Congress, and maybe they briefed President Biden, but certainly they didn't tell him everything that was going on. Now, although President Trump didn't mention it specifically in the speech last night, Venezuela definitely does play a part in this release. Of course, we've already heard the stories about Smartmatic and the creation of the electronic voting system as it exists in modern times. But adversaries in Venezuela devised a scheme to electronically hack into voting systems and not be detected. And of course, that's not that difficult to do when they control the software that these very voting systems are based on. And they have used them before. The CIA has shown and reported in their intelligence products that Venezuela has manipulated dozens of elections around the world. also very exciting last night was when President Trump directly pointed to the GBI strategies controversy that took place where in 2020 in Michigan, there were thousands of fake voter registrations that were discovered due to the diligent work of a clerk in Michigan. We've talked about that on a number of occasions. We will talk about that and other states where it's happened. We have spoken about these before, but I think it's always good to go back and remind ourselves. What was most shocking about the events of GBI strategies and their illegal activity is that the police locally contacted the state police, who contacted the FBI, who came in and did nothing about it. They just chose not to do anything about it, probably because they were like, we don't want to stop them from committing fraud. We just want to stop them from getting any charges. And then, of course, dead people, illegal aliens. The DHS has found hundreds of thousands of these people on voter rolls today. So the message from from Harmeet Dillon to all of those secretaries of states makes a lot of sense. She set up an opportunity for them to do the right thing. She has now created consciousness of guilt, and DHS is now telling them exactly how many illegal aliens, dead people, and so many others are on their voting rolls. So the biggest takeaway of all is that we were right. We were always right. We knew that the election was stolen in 2020. We gave up a lot to continue to say that over the years. We were ridiculed. We had articles written about us. We had our livelihoods taken. We had our bank accounts shut down. We had our channels deleted. We were canceled. We were marginalized. We were ridiculed. And we were always right. The election was stolen, and we knew it, and we did not bend from that position. And now here we are, and President Trump has exposed the deep state to the entire world. There is so much more, you guys, and we are going to go through much of this directly right now. First, let me say thank you very much to Untamed Nation for the sending of the viewers over in the raid. I really do appreciate you. All right. Now, as I said earlier, probably the most consequential speech of President Trump's life. That's why I say this is the most consequential episode of Red Pill News you're ever going to see. On the White House website last night, as President Trump began going through all of these various things, he mentioned that the White House was publishing a whole host of documents. This is merely the first tranche of documents. Not all of the documents have been released yet. But you can see here right on the website for the White House. And first of all, when we were live, JR and I did a live stream last night, and we did a little bit of commentary afterwards. The White House website went down. It was a 429 error, and you couldn't get into it. After a little bit, it looks like they got some more capacity together, and they were able to get it back up and running. But this entire release is all about election integrity, election security. I feel like that's a more appropriate term for it. But after the 2020 election, as you all know, we had concerns. There were a lot of people who had concerns. We saw voting irregularities all around the country. We saw issues of black boxes that we were not allowed to look in. Very clear evidence of people hacking into these machines. Forensic experts showing us time and time again that all of our suspicions were correct. Registrations of fake and dead people, ghost voters in virtually every state all around the country. Now, if you want to, you can begin the downloading of all of these documents. They belong in 4 different zip files. First of all, President Trump has given us this information in 4 different areas. Number 1 relates to vulnerabilities in electronic voting and ballot counting systems. Number 2 is China's acquisition and exploitation of American voter data and the implications of China meddling in our elections and our conversations are far, far greater than simply them just stealing the personal identifying information of individual people. Of course, then we have the section about Michigan voter registrations investigation. That was GBI strategies. And then, very importantly, non-citizens on the state voter rolls. Now, you can follow along, sign up for updates on the White House website, and as they release more information, they will go ahead and send you updates on it. But let's go through some of this stuff, and we will obviously be watching a couple of clips of President Trump and his speech from last night. Also, Mark Wayne Mullen, DHS Secretary, and his response early this morning. All right, so I mentioned Venezuela. Well, the topic of Venezuela I was hoping would come up last night, but maybe it was that President Trump didn't want to overwhelm everybody, and also because we essentially own Venezuela now. So, whatever we're finding out from Venezuela, definitely we're using it. I think that it would be great if we do find out that Maduro has turned state's evidence, as many people from the Venezuelan military already have, coming to the United States of America, giving depositions and filing evidence and their experience in developing these products to manipulate elections. But in this CIA product from June 29th, of 2026. That's just a couple of weeks ago. CIA said Smartmatic poses a national security threat. Smartmatic is the underpinning software of the majority of electronic voting systems here in the United States. That is just one aspect of vulnerabilities. In 2012, they planned to deploy pre-programmed voting machines in pro-Chavez areas to swing the election by 1.5 million votes in Venezuela. Guess what? Chavez won by 1.6 million votes. Sound familiar, guys? We've seen this happen in all of the swing states around the country. Fulton County, Maricopa County, Wayne, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, all over the place. So this CIA intelligence product is approved by the current CIA. It was developed based upon findings of prior CIAs, and there is nothing fake about this. There is nothing non-evidentiary about this. This is appropriate to enter into evidence in a court of law. Right here, prior to Venezuela's 2012 presidential election, Redacted reported that Chavez's intelligence services, including the General Directorate of Military Counterintelligence and the Bolivarian Intelligence Service, worked with the National Electoral Council and Smartmatic to develop plans to manipulate election results using pre-programmed voting machines. Redacted reported that these plans called for deploying altered machines to approximately 300 voting centers in traditionally pro-Chavez areas to ensure victory by approximately 1.5 million votes. Following the election, which Chavez won by approximately 1.6 million votes, sources reported that Chavez congratulated his team for successfully implementing the manipulation plan. This is confirmation that everything that we've heard from these Venezuelan sources since they've come here, given evidence to the DOJ and to the federal government, is 100% true. So we're just waiting to see what additional information is going to be brought in by them. Now, also, shockingly, or perhaps not so shockingly, in one of the emails that President Trump released last night, he exposes a female FBI official who essentially wrote about herself running a shadow government. If anybody is going to tell you that the deep state is not real or has never existed, I think that maybe you could just show them this message in and of itself. And if they don't want to understand the gravity of this, then I don't think that they are worth saving.
USA reports about China's election targeting were kept out of the presidential briefing. These were briefings I would get almost every day. Everything was kept out that was of importance. One email among intelligence analysts admitted that they had, quote, deliberately massaged the presidential daily briefing to withhold information regarding Chinese activities related to the election. Another official inside the FBI wrote that she was running, quote, a shadow government, unquote, to keep intelligence about China's election meddling from becoming known and to keep it away from the honorable press. Other officials who witnessed such efforts perceived the motivations to be blatantly political. Recently, we found...
So here's the question. At which point does the actions of these people become seditious and treasonous? I believe the answer we already have. They've already surpassed that threshold. And I want you to know, President Trump also specifically made mention that they are going after these people criminally. So who is that shadow government FBI agent? Her name is Nikki Flores. She was an FBI analyst who is the one who said she was running the shadow government. And on her LinkedIn, you can see that she is now employed at Microsoft as the director of insider risk. She herself has now become an insider risk for Microsoft. And you can see here, Nikki Flores, a lot of the names of people making statements about this stuff were redacted. Nikki Flores' name was not redacted, which makes me think that they are going to file charges against her very soon. They want her to know that they know exactly who she is and that she's in trouble. Now, you can see the person she's messaging, their name is redacted. The person she says that she's running a shadow government to is totally redacted, but not Nikki Flores. So Nikki is definitely finding herself in a very uncomfortable position. You can see here in this tweet from the FBI Dallas back in 2021, where she was placed in counterintelligence. She said, "You can focus on the negative or you can focus on the positive and let that be your drive. Show up to work and add value. Everybody wants to work for the boss that loves their job. Don't wait for an invitation to sit at the table." I guess maybe she could also add in, don't wait for an invitation to usurp the democratically elected president of the United States of America as well. Here is the announcement from 2022. Of course, after she ran a shadow government and basically kept all of this very important intelligence away from President Trump, she was rewarded for her efforts. She was pushed up the chain at the FBI. In 2022, she was named intelligence analyst in charge of the intelligence division of the Washington field office. And of course, it was Christopher Wray who promoted her. I have to believe Christopher Wray was aware of everything that happened during this time as well. Nikki Flores on her LinkedIn right here. She lives currently in the District of Columbia in Washington, D.C. She went to George Washington University. And as I said, she currently works at Microsoft. I wonder if she's going to take a leave of absence. Now, taking a look here at an article from Just the News where Nikki said that she was running this shadow government. She was one of those key FBI officials, not the only one. She might have been running the shadow government, but there were many other people that she was working with. On September 25th of 2020, this was obviously a couple of weeks before the election took place, she was at the forefront of the FBI's efforts to recall and suppress an intelligence information report. That report contained information from an FBI confidential source which told them everything they needed to know. Allegations that the Chinese government was producing those fake driver's licenses for fraudulent mail-in votes in support of Democratic nominee Joseph Robinette Biden at that point. So the FBI turned over this evidence of the alleged plot to Congress in June of just last year. Senator Chuck Grassley, the Republican chairman of the Judiciary Committee, is the one who then released some of the emails which revealed Flores's role in suppressing that initial intelligence report. So from all appearances, based on those emails, the Bureau seems to have been afraid that they would undercut FBI Director Christopher Wray's assurances to Congress that foreign meddling actually never posed a threat to the presidential race. But you can clearly see from this confidential source, it's obvious that it did. Put it together with all of the other efforts of China to meddle in the election, it's undeniable. So the intervention to recall that intelligence report is not isolated. This was not a one-off, and this is, again, why it's so important that we're getting these millions of documents. They show a pattern of behavior. In those very sensitive weeks before the November 2020 election, another senior analyst in the intelligence community also admitted that the presidential daily brief was being tailored and altered to avoid mentioning any election-related issues. Essentially, the presidential daily brief is a one-pager of intelligence that's produced by the intelligence agencies and then handed over to the president. So every morning, he can see what is the most important things that are going on in the background that may not be reported in the media. By keeping those very important aspects of the election out of that presidential daily brief, they robbed the president of having the knowledge and then being able to take action to secure the election. The quote from this email: "We have deliberately massaged our one pending PDB to avoid any direct links to the election." This was from a strategic intelligence analyst who specialized in China. That name is currently redacted, but I don't think that it's going to be redacted forever. Obviously, the people on the National Intelligence Council who eventually saw this message were absolutely flabbergasted. In the records that are released alongside this, they seem to be questioning just what in the hell is going on. I mean, this is the president, and the PDB is something that he depends on a daily basis to make sure that he can keep America safe and obviously do his job. Small update from the NSA below. The director of election threat analysis at the National Intelligence Council writes, their PDB isn't going to tie into the election? The mind boggles. This is a really good example, but far from the only one, of what I've been raising since the summer, that the IC is deliberately avoiding mentioning a connection to elections for non-substantive reasons. And this was the National Intelligence Officer for Cyber who wrote that at the same time. So these communications, guess what, were combined in batches of the hundreds of pages of documents that Trump declassified and released as part of the speech. He mentions it in the speech that many of these documents were, of course, found in those burn bags. He also directly names Barack Hussein Obama. Of course, by the time these things were being discussed, it was President Trump's own administration, own intelligence community that was actively thwarting his ability to do his job. But it all goes back to Obama. All roads lead to Obama. Now, the memos show that by 2023, Beijing had accrued all of these hundreds of millions of voter records from the United States. There was already detections back in 2020 of China coming in and attempting to sweep up all of this American voter data. We've spoken about this previously, but the intelligence community knew that China had gained access to the voter registration data all the way back in 2020, but they had continued to keep it a secret. And not until yesterday did Americans know full force exactly how many files China had actually obtained. One of the overlooked memos that was declassified by the Biden administration back in 2022, 2 years after it was written, alluded to these intrusions, but it was also heavily redacted by likely those who wanted to make sure that an upcoming president, if it happened to be President Trump, would not have the full complement of information so that action could be taken. So, redacted, Chinese intelligence officials analyzed multiple U.S. states' redacted election voter registration data, redacted to conduct public opinion analysis of the 2020 general election, cyber operations enabling expansive authoritarianism, they warned at the time. Now, again, we've known that some intelligence community officials believe there were analysts that were working to conceal this information from the president and the public at large. But now we know that by April of 2020, Chinese intelligence had already stolen all of this data. Multiple states had already been penetrated. Analysis of these intrusions was also being kept quiet. The CIA specifically was blocking efforts to inform President Trump and then later stopped many of these reports from being made available to Congress. However, it is worth mentioning that current CIA Director John Ratcliffe was a major driving force in helping to make sure that this information President Trump delivered last night was given to the American public. During the Biden administration, when I raised concerns about the legal requirements to share these and other reports with congressional oversight, they changed my job to exclude me from elections, and then they fired me. That was the intelligence community analytic ombudsman, Barry Zoloff, and he conducted a review of the spy community's handling of Russian versus Chinese meddling efforts during the 2020 election. Now, he's the one we've spoken about before. He had concluded at that time that China was a much bigger problem than Russia. And of course, when he brought it forward, the people who hated President Trump in the intelligence community saw fit to marginalize him and effectively get him fired so that his concerns could not be delivered to anybody else. Now, I mentioned CIA Director John Ratcliffe. Here is his announcement from late last night, shortly after President Trump's speech. He wrote, to support President Trump's transparency initiatives, CIA has taken significant steps, including providing declassified documents for public release. Protecting our democracy and the integrity of our elections from foreign influence and interference remains paramount. This is why we produced key intelligence reporting showing that Venezuela's government had developed capabilities to manipulate electronic voting systems, raising serious concerns for U.S. election infrastructure security. I have long publicly highlighted China's nefarious efforts to influence the 2020 election against President Trump, as evidenced by my dissent to the flawed January 2021 intelligence community assessment. The documents declassified today shed further light on China's intentions. These matters deserve a public scrutiny to ensure our democracy's foundation. The security and public confidence in our elections is unassailable. Well, I'm glad that he is going on the record to talk about this. Now, also, Representative Rick Crawford brings up something that I know is on your minds. It was certainly on my mind as President Trump was detailing just how duplicitous and deceptive his own intelligence community was in keeping all of this a secret. Representative Crawford says, in light of the developments unveiled at the president's address, I call upon CIA Director Ratcliffe to immediately take decisive action to hold all of those involved at the CIA accountable for their egregious betrayals of the American people's trust. We all can agree that bureaucrats who manipulated or conceal intelligence from the people's elected leaders to push their preferred policies or end states cannot keep their jobs in America's intelligence community. Those involved and any who knew and remained silent must be immediately removed from their positions of trust. The House Intel Committee will be following up to ensure this is done. Crawford sits on the Intel Committee. Certainly, that is one way to go about it. Yes, they should definitely be fired. Yes, they should definitely have their pensions taken. Yes, they should definitely be removed. But even more importantly, charges must be brought against these people. Treason and sedition. We are at a point where I think this is going to continue to happen unless people are put in prison, unless people are, might I say, put to death. The Rosenbergs were fried for a reason, and what these people have done against President Trump, against America, against our republic is far, far more damaging than anything the Rosenbergs did. Now, these declassified emails shockingly also show that members of the NSA deliberately hid these intel assessments from President Trump. These are the ones who said that they were massaging the presidential daily briefing and any links to the election. While this is important for your report, I'm sure, it also has the potential to be a near-term issue we still need to draw attention to. This is a really good example, but far from the only one, of what I've been raising since the summer, that the IC is deliberately avoiding mentioning a connection to elections for non-substantive reasons. Obviously, since Redacted isn't released yet, they're holding it out for a week. There isn't a PDB, so maybe it won't end up being an issue. But this is a highly irregular way to do things, especially as someone trying to raise tradecraft and substantive objections to the mainline analysis and isn't getting our work incorporated or even mentioned. So now this was the National Intelligence Officer for Cyber at the ODNI. This was one of the people who knew what was happening and who was calling out the people at NSA who were directly massaging the information. The direct quote is that the NSA deliberately massaged our one pending PDB to avoid any direct links to the election. Whoever it was in the NSA, whoever it was in the FBI, whoever it was in the CIA, every single one of those people not only need to be fired, they need to have their security clearance stripped, and they need to be charged, and they need to be put on trial, and they need to be imprisoned. This, in my opinion, is at a minimum worthy of life in prison. Here we have the actual email from which that ODNI staff member was quoting. And it says all, meaning there were multiple people who got this email. So again, there are multiple people who I think need to be held accountable. Blank has heard and received nothing. Probably Trump has heard and received nothing. We have deliberately massaged our one pending PDB to avoid any direct links to the election. The massive report we have been waiting on has been chopped up into 13 reports and will likely not get out until late next week. Many, all of them, will be cross-posted into redacted or downgraded to redacted so that they can be more readily incorporated into the 45-day piece if needed. And I believe this was written on November 19th, 2020, it would appear. There was supposed to be a post-election report that was being written by John Ratcliffe, okay? Wasn't he the NSA or he was the DNI at that time? I can't remember. It's been such a long time. but he was supposed to put together that report, and he did end up releasing it, and he said that it was China, not Russia, that was meddling in our election. But of course, he didn't say anything about people within the government taking this information and deliberately obscuring it, because we don't even know if they were aware of it at that time. Now, also, shockingly, President Trump declared last night that there were also evidence from these people that they were directly doing this, not just to stop President Trump from being able to take action on this stuff, but the election-related information was also being done on behalf of China. All right? We will talk about that specific stuff in just a moment. But first, I do want to talk about GBI Strategies, because GBI Strategies is a story that's near and dear to my heart. If you guys have been watching the channel for a couple of years, you've probably heard the numerous times that I've talked about it. GBI Strategies was a voter registration nonprofit that was active in Michigan and a couple of other states. And they essentially faked a whole bunch of voter registration slips, and they tried to inject them into the system in Michigan. And if it wasn't for a keen-eyed clerk in Muskegon, then they might have gotten away with it. Now, on October 8th, 2020, so 1 month before the election, Ann Misich, who is the clerk at that time in Muskegon, noticed that a black female, whose name is redacted in the police report, but she was later identified as Brianna Hawkins, she was dropping off a lot of voter registration slips. Between 8,000 and 10,000 of them had been completed. Now, that's unusual, of course, perhaps not as unusual for a voter drive organization. But when you look at the slips themselves, it becomes very obvious that something untoward is taking place. So Misich responded to this drop-off by contacting the Muskegon Police Department. And she said, hey, I think you guys need to investigate. Something unusual is happening here. According to the Michigan State Police, on October 21st, the First Lieutenant Mike Anderson was contacted by Tom Fabus, who was the Chief of Investigations for the Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel's office. Mr. Fabus requested that Michigan State Police give their assistance with a joint investigation, that they together look into these claims of voter fraud that might have been conducted there in Muskegon. And considering that GBI Strategies had been operating in a number of different cities across Michigan, it stands to reason that perhaps it was a much larger operation than simply Muskegon. Now, here we have a post that Ann put out in October 5th of 2020, and she asks people on her Facebook, anybody else receive a box of voter registrations? Hundreds of voter registration applications? The return states EM with an address of Staybridge Hotel in Auburn Hills with many duplicate signatures and incomplete addresses. I just started looking and I found these already. Now you can clearly see Diamond Anderson, Corey Thompson, Derek Jackson, Jimmy Brown, and Lachey Blackman all have signatures that are apparently written by the exact same person. So the Muskegon Police and the Michigan State Police investigated. They did find a couple of strange things. They went and they found all of these forms. They took them from the Muskegon clerk. She stated that it was her opinion these people are definitely putting in these fake voter registration forms. It's highly suspicious, possibly fraudulent. That's why we need the investigation. Her opinion was solely based upon her status as the clerk and the fact that you had numerous forms which appeared, as I showed you just a moment ago, to have been completed by the exact same person. The same person was writing signatures for many, many, many different people. And of course, the addresses didn't fix. The hotel itself obviously does not going to have people living there. She investigated further. She also found phone numbers on multiple forms that were totally erroneous, and that the signatures on these forms might have been for a real person, but the signature that was on file did not in any way match the signature that Brianna Hawkins was turning in with all of these. And they can check that because they've got signature match on file with the Michigan Secretary of State. So the investigator that was assigned to this case spoke with Brianna Hawkins, that female suspect, And she basically told them exactly what was going on. She was being paid $1,100 a week, $1,150 a week. And her job was to find unregistered voters and then provide them with a form so that they could get registered. And then they would be able to vote or obtain an absentee ballot if they were registered to vote. Now, the only problem, as I said, was that the handwriting on these things were identical. Not all of them, but most of them. And many of these people had addresses which were totally fake. This is exactly like what we saw in California from Cam Higbee and James O'Keefe's prior stories of election and registration fraud. So this woman worked for GBI Strategies, and she was interviewed by the Attorney General's investigator. He literally tells her during the course of this investigation that crimes were committed. Knowing that he admitted to her that crimes were being committed makes it all the more frustrating that no crimes were ever charged. There was a cover-up in the office of Jocelyn Benson, Secretary of State, now currently running for the governor's position. She and her analyst, Corey Ames, were key to covering up the GBI Strategies investigation. Mr. Ames clearly stated in the report from the Michigan State Police that a quantity of the forms they found are clearly fraudulent. Now, because Miss Benson is running for governor in the state of Michigan, because she was privy to the information that fraudulent voter registrations were on file, because she has been put on notice by Harmeet Dillon and the Department of Justice, and now because President Trump has declassified this investigation on GBI Strategies, we have the consciousness of guilt. We now have a situation where the Department of Justice could much more easily file charges against her for knowingly allowing these things to happen. Now, what's even worse, probably the reason that Michigan wanted to cover this up is because GBI Strategies was being paid by Democrats. There was a $1.5 million payment by the Doug Jones for Senate campaign back in 2018, and investigators found that they were also paid $188,000 by the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee in 2018, and another $657,260 from the New American Jobs Fund went to GBI Strategies. So the money was strong within the Democrat political community. Oh, yeah. Can't forget about Joe Biden and U.S. Senate candidate Gary Peters. Also, they were also funding GBI Strategies. $242,000 and $242,133 from Joe Biden for president, and then another $243,133 from Gary Peters for Senate. Now, all told, GBI Strategies delivered about 10,000 registration forms to that clerk's office in Muskegon, and the vast majority of them were totally fraudulent. There were 42 suspected fraudulent applications that they identified for this report from the Michigan State Police. I don't know why they didn't try to verify that more of them were fraudulent, probably because the more fraud they found, the worse it would look when they eventually didn't bring any charges against people. Now, the strangest part is that when they went to the business location of GBI Strategies, they found that there appeared to be a sophisticated set of criminal activities that were taking place. They had dozens of burner phones, brand new phones that had not yet even been activated. They had hundreds of prepaid payment cards. The only reason you have prepaid payment cards is so that you don't have to have your name or your identity tied to that. You can load the money from Joe Biden for president or Gary Peters for Senate on that card, and then the person can effectively anonymously spend as much money as they need to do whatever needs to be done. And it will never tie back unless, of course, they get a video or a picture and facial recognition. And then also at the GBI Strategies headquarters, they found a lot more of these partially filled out voter registration forms. There were also a bunch of Pelican cases, which were loaded with semi-automatic rifles. They were SBRs. They also had their own suppressors. Each rifle had its own suppressor. There were also optics and customized pistols. One of the cases had 4 rifles and 4 pistols. totally based, but I don't see why a voter registration outfit is going to need to kit themselves out like a small Blackwater Black Ops outfit in the same way that you would if you were going to be going into an African nation and deposing a despotic leader. So the guns were all stored at GBI Strategies in these unlocked Pelican cases. Theoretically, anybody could have had access to them. They were all owned and registered to Gary Bell. Gary Bell, if you'll remember, is the owner of GBI Strategies. The man is basically a ghost at this point. He has totally disappeared. They also had whiteboards where they were kind of war gaming exactly what they were going to do. One of the whiteboards in the headquarters read that a message that said, "Weapons in the field, prepared for shifts." So does that mean that when these people were going out to, quote, register voters, the people were bringing their SBRs and concealing them so that just in case they were going to get in a shootout with somebody? I mean, Michigan is not a very Second Amendment friendly state. Sure, you can get a permit to carry concealed, but most of the people who were working for GBI Strategies were not residents of Michigan. They were coming from all around the country. And again, I just cannot fathom a need for voter registration drive workers to have to carry around SBRs with silencers and optics. I mean, if you were doing assassination hit squads, I mean, I can definitely see how you would need to carry those things around, but not like this. We also, I mean, add to the fact that it seems that most of these people were just writing out the cards themselves. They weren't even having to interact with the general public. So Gary Bell, of course, was reported to the ATF, and they came in to inspect all these weapons. They found that there was nothing wrong with this. I mean, of course, you know, Gary had all the paperwork, so theoretically everything is legal. They didn't get video footage or evidence that these people had been going out and killing people. So, I mean, you know, that's kind of where it landed. Now, the Attorney General at that time, Dana Nessel, was asked about all of this by the Detroit News. And she said that the landlord had left the guns there. That's obviously completely not factual because the ATF and the Michigan State Police already reported in their own report that the weapons were registered to Gary Bell. Gary Bell, the owner of GBI Strategies. Again, give me any sort of reason why he would need to have SBRs with silencers and optics for his employees when they were getting out the vote. So after Dana Nessel's office was contacted by the Detroit News and he asked about these weapons and she lied, said they belonged to the landlord, there was another unredacted police report that came out. It looks like somebody leaked it because they were pissed off that Michigan was lying about this. And in that report, we got the confirmation that it was Gary Bell who owned these weapons. Also, we learned that he was in Iowa at the time of the raid. I am a firearms owner. I own plenty of SBRs. I love short-barreled rifles. I got plenty of suppressors. I'm not going to leave those in the hands of anybody else. And depending on who the person is who's going to be in possession of that weapon, I could be in legal jeopardy based upon who they are, their legality of them holding onto that weapon, committing crimes with that weapon. So anyways, there was the crime of election forgery that happened here. And the evidence to show that GBI Strategies was doing this stuff, it was quite literally limitless. Now, in the release that came out last night, we have a tweet from my friend John here, John Harold, and he says, during the FBI's 2020 Muskegon GBI Strategies investigation into fraudulent voter registration, the FBI did a database check of just 20 randomly selected voter registration applications. That was from that tranche of 10,000 that were brought in by Breonna Hawkins that were probably fraudulent. Now, what's shocking about this, and I mentioned just a moment ago that they didn't bother looking at any more than just that handful. Apparently, they didn't need to, because 65% of the randomly selected ballots that they picked out of this batch of 10,000 were fraudulent. And they were fraudulent in a number of ways. 7 contained completely fabricated information. Voter registration application for somebody who does not exist and never has. 4 of them contained a real name, but the date of birth, the driver's license, and or the social security number didn't even match. One of them had a real name, but the middle name didn't match. One of them never even lived in Muskegon, and it was a totally fabricated address. Out of the group that they chose, only 7 had correct information, meaning that they were registering a real, live, living person in the state of Michigan. And of course, you know, no criminal charges. No criminal charges for anybody at GBI Strategies. All right, you guys, if you haven't yet, do me a favor. I would sincerely appreciate it if you hit that like button or if you helped us out by sharing the show. Again, this is a very important show. Hopefully, I'll clip all of this later on. Need to say thank you to Deborah Putnam, who says, thank you for all your hard work and all you do for us. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And let me also thank Rumble and another sponsor of the program. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. It is a new era for America First International Assistance. President Trump has been clear. America won't hesitate to act, and we won't write blank checks. So from now on, U.S. assistance will be strategic, accountable, and tied to results that make America safer and more secure. That means stronger borders, tougher enforcement, real cooperation to stop illegal immigration, and keep deadly drugs out of our communities, most importantly. America First assistance will stabilize fragile regions before crises reach our shores, strengthen key partners, and support American farmers, manufacturers, and workers. 80% of President Trump's supporters support this type of international assistance. And to Beijing, especially after last night, if you're using aid to buy influence and control, the game is changing. America will lead with strength, with purpose, and with conditions that put our security first. To learn more, use that QR code on screen, and thank you very much to them for supporting the program. All right. So it was wonderful to see President Trump talking about GBI strategies. He didn't say GBI strategies, but he didn't need to. I literally, I cried out when I heard him say this, and but there is a lot more. And if you have, again, seen the show for a couple of years, you know that Michigan is not the only place where this has happened. There was another such incident in Lancaster, Pennsylvania in October of 2024, another investigation showing that there was a massive fraudulent voter registration operation. In that investigation, they found at least 2,500 ballot registrations that were in question. This was in Lehigh, Pennsylvania. They announced that they were also investigating hundreds of fake ballot registrations that were turned in recently by a group very similar to GBI Strategies. There were more of them found in Lancaster, Monroe, and York counties. All had the exact same situation. At least 2 of the counties reported the company Field Plus Media Corp as being behind these fraudulent registrations. Now, they also are operating in Arizona. However, Arizona did not come forward. Michigan, all about GBI Strategies, but GBI Strategies was also operating in other areas as well. In August of 2024, the Hamilton County Board of Elections also turned over several suspicious voter registration applications to the Ohio Secretary of State. And according to Hamilton County, the voter registrations in question were recently turned in by another self-described progressive voter registration operation. This time, their name is Black Fork Strategies. The Hamilton County Director of Elections was named Sherry Poland. She held up a big stack of these fraudulent registrations during a local meeting, and she said that just one canvasser from Black Fork had turned all of those in, and the reason they knew they were fake, again, much like GBI, they all had the exact same handwriting. Now, this actually did lead to more. In June of 2026, the FBI, President Trump's FBI, raided the organization Ohio Organizing Collaborative as part of a still ongoing federal investigation into ballot harvesting and these fake voter registration operations. So that case is still ongoing. And then heading on over to Arizona, where 40,000 of the registrations almost half of the total were damaged or incomplete. They could not be used. This is in Maricopa County. Many of these registration forms had been dated just a couple of weeks prior, and Arizona law mandates that third-party groups submit registration forms within 5 days of collecting these voter registration forms. So it appears that somebody for this organization was registering people and then hanging on to them until they got a big stack, and then they would bring them in. The condition of them basically made it obvious that somebody had been sitting on these registrations for quite a long time. There were up to 90,000 forms that were submitted by these third-party groups on the very last day of voter registration, and the recorder's office obviously took notice of it. Since that time, about 50,000 of those forms were processed, although some were incomplete and some of them required additional information, which made them unable to be used as registration. But an estimated 30 to 40,000 forms were entirely unusable because of the condition. They were wet, torn, otherwise damaged, and most likely they had been in the possession of these people for longer than the 5 days. Now, the third-party group that dumped these thousands of registrations off also needs to be investigated, and just like all of these various ones that we've talked about. And I have to believe that President Trump's speech was designed for maximum effect, maximum effort, talking about the worst things that he possibly could, leading to a whole host of other incidentals, just like we saw in Michigan. So nobody is safe. All of these organizations are being looked at. Let me see. CK Felt says, headed to Michigan tomorrow, Zach, for the Venetian Festival in Charlevoix. Charlevoix is beautiful. I'm really hoping to have time to listen next week. I hope you do too, and I hope you have a good time. Also, earlier this week, my liberal uncle asked for proof of election fraud, laughed at him, and told him it's coming. I also shared some of your information from last week about the people arrested. Excellent. That's great. I hope that it had an effect on him. Hopefully, he was willing to listen. All right, so with the theft of the hundreds of thousands of American voter registration information, there are some specific vulnerabilities that make this a problem that obviously needs to be addressed. So when your personal identifying information is stolen, obviously there's a whole host of things that could happen in your personal life. Your bank account could be hacked. They could change your address and have your mail forwarded somewhere else. They could have illegal things delivered in your name to your home. They could obviously register to vote in your name. They could change your voter registration information from where you actually live to someplace else in the state and vote in your name. They could also double register for you in an entirely different state that isn't going to share information and isn't going to cross-reference those two things. So then your vote becomes null and void because somebody else is already using it. Now, this is one that I would have thought the mainstream media would have been all over. It's very obvious. China hacked our elections. Think about how many times they were talking about Russia hacking our elections. Remember when they went after the Iranians who allegedly tried hacking into our elections, albeit unsuccessfully? 2 years ago, the Chinese did this exact same thing in the UK. And the media was aghast about the possibilities of what could potentially go wrong. But 200 million voter registration entries affecting 18 states. You guys know we have like 320 million people in the entirety of the United States. So this is, almost every single voter in the United States who's registered has had their information stolen. Of course, this only affects 18 states, but every single person who was in this tranche of data, their information is no longer secure. Now, because they were able to prove that this intrusion happened, it triggered a review by the Department of Homeland Security and the new CISA, Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency, where they're looking now at these voter registration systems. They performed this review, and then they outlined exactly how this data could be exploited and what you might have to worry about. So in this report, they warned that foreign countries, which of course include China, Russia, Iran, a whole host of them, they have consistently targeted these state voter registration databases over the last decade. And the impact of these breaches is not limited to simply undermining confidence or spreading false claims. Again, the data itself could be used months or years after the initial breach has actually taken place, And that means that the true threat of your personal identifying information having been stolen, we may not know until the time that it actually happens. But malicious actors, as I said, could obtain a absentee ballot in your name in another state. They could cast that ballot, effectively negating your original vote. This is totally possible because in pretty much every early election jurisdiction, the information required to apply and then receive an absentee ballot is stored where? In the voter information database, the exact information that these Chinese spies were able to steal. And that data never expires. It's just there and they can use it, and they've done it. And I guarantee you they have probably cast ballots in people's names. So a breach obviously is going to allow these bad actors to get your public information, your name, your date of birth, your address, but also your sensitive information, which includes your driver's license number, either a full or partial version of your social security number, your voter signature, which, given the advances in AI, they could load up your signature into a sophisticated AI program and then use that to sign your name on a ballot, and it would totally pass the muster if it was being checked by a person. All of this information is highly, highly dangerous in the hands of somebody that is not you. And then also, of course, a malicious actor could use the data from this breach to alter your voter records, as I said. They could change your address, therefore changing the polling station that you go to. You show up theoretically to vote someplace, and they say, no, this is not where you're supposed to vote. Let me see your ID. And they say, oh my gosh, your driver's license says you vote here, but you changed your address in the system, so you can't vote here. And then when you get to the other polling place, they say, well, you can't vote here either because your driver's license has a different address on it. If, let's say it's a primary, if they changed your party affiliation to another party and you live in a state where they have closed primaries, you would not be able to vote in that primary, effectively taking away your ability to choose that candidate. This would be especially effective in states like New York, Florida, Delaware. All of those places, you've got to be registered with your political party if you're going to vote in that party's primary. And again, the number of people who are affected by this is staggering. Every single person in America should be worried about the confidence in our elections now, knowing that our records can be altered. Your vote can be stolen. There is nothing, even with a paper ballot, that can be done to stop this from being an issue now that your personal information is in the hands of bad actors working in an intelligence agency in another country. They could also use this data to bypass identity checks, log into official online state systems. They could delete voter registration files entirely. So then when you show up to vote, oh my gosh, you're not registered to vote. Boom. Take off. We're not going to let you vote. So the report produced by DHS calls for specific steps to be taken by state and local election officials so that we can protect these voter databases and then limit the ways the compromised data can be exploited, such as by using smart network monitoring and multi-factor authentication. So let me take a look here. There is a specific announcement from Mark Wayne Mullen where he discusses exactly what they are going to be doing. Now, let's see. You know what? I might not have the clip. Essentially, Mark Wayne Mullen said that they are going into each of these states where they know this happened. They have teams set up to secure and ensure that this data is not going to be used improperly and that the elections are secure there. And you don't have to accept their help. But if you don't accept their help, you get no money for elections and you have absolutely no support in anything. Otherwise, if you want to make sure that your information is secure and that your states can be trusted, then, of course, the federal government will pay for everything. Now, getting back to China. We had elements of the intelligence community that actively were helping China just because they hated Trump. But then you also had elements of the intelligence community that were either blackmailed or were attempting to be blackmailed by China. And we can see this in this release from the 10th of July. Beijing escalating efforts to shape U.S. policy on China. Redacted warns that a White House official that Beijing had derogatory information on him in an effort to compel him to take a restrained approach on China. So China was basically saying, we've got blackmail material on you. We know you work at the White House. We know you're in the administration, and we're going to reveal this information through social media. Unless you go in to the administration and you tell them that they need to take a softer approach on China. And they also have evidence showing that China has been successfully doing this since before the 2020 election. Should not surprise anybody. Also, in relation to China, journalists across the fake news media were paid by China to produce fake and deleterious stories about President Trump, number one, in an effort to either get him to drop out or to lose the election, and then also to create mistrust among the American people, the smooth-brained TDS sufferers that were reading that fake news. And President Trump called them out directly. He didn't name them, but they certainly know exactly who these people are. And I think it's only a matter of time before these people are brought up on charges as well. Take a listen.
The Chinese government sought to identify U.S. journalists who had reported negatively on the U.S. president and pay them large sums of money to write more negative articles about him, as many as they could, and they didn't care what they said. The Chinese government wanted U.S. president to lose the next election, and the reason they wanted me to lose is because they knew I was wise to them, charged them billions and billions of dollars worth of tariffs, and built the strongest military anywhere in the world. We have the strongest military anywhere in the world. These are exact quotes from the CIA reporting. The name of the person doing the quote is now under review. The Chinese government sought to identify U.S. journalists who...
Okay, so those U.S. journalists have been identified. Those U.S. journalists are being investigated. And I believe those U.S. journalists should also be charged with treason. So where were these journalists at? Probably at every fake news outlet that you can possibly imagine. And President Trump wants to have them, of course, at a minimum, fired and have them lose their right to be reporters. So the White House. OK, and here's another thing. I'm sure you'll remember several months, early on in the Trump term 2.0, the DOJ made the announcement that they were bringing back task forces. And those task forces will essentially be a collective of people from different law enforcement and intelligence agencies working together to basically flood the zone on specific investigations. A number of the pieces that President Trump mentioned last night are being handled by such task forces. And one of these task forces is specifically handling the investigation of these fake news journalists who were essentially sellouts to China. So last night, maybe some of those journalists that that took money to report inaccurately on President Trump back in 2020 were also the same ones who refused to broadcast President Trump's speech last night. You had NBC, CNN, ABC, and CBS all refusing to carry the speech on their networks. John King on CNN announced live that CNN would not host this speech so that they could go over the documents that President Trump was going to release because, of course, they believe that he makes false statements and they can't just allow the president to speak. Obviously, it seemed to me like they were scared shitless about the information that the president was going to be revealing. Let's go ahead and hear this clip. Almost there. Of course, they were also interviewing John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock. I think that there was no specific comment from the president about Warnock and Ossoff being illegitimate. I think that that was part of the canary trap that the White House allowed to leak earlier in the week, the actual content of President Trump's speech was far more damning than anything the mainstream media had predicted it was going to be. But take a listen. Listen to John King rationalize shutting down the President of the United States.
A quick reminder to our viewers, we'll be watching tonight's presidential address and listening to what the president says tonight. But we're not going to take it live, as we've been discussing. That's because this president, sadly, has a history of misleading and in some cases simply false statements on what we've been talking about tonight, election security and integrity. Also, the White House earlier today said he would be showing newly classified documents. So we want to make sure that we have time to review those documents, talk to experts about them, contextualize whatever he says or shows before airing it. But if there is news, we will bring it to you ASAP.
Now, no word on whether or not CNN has actually reported on any of this. It reminds me a little bit of when Chris Cuomo went on CNN and said that it was illegal for you, the public, to look at documents that were released, I believe, by WikiLeaks, or maybe it was O'Keefe Media Group. He said, no, it's illegal for you to look at these documents. We can do it because we're in the media. These so-called journalists think that the American people are so effing stupid. Now, President Trump called them out last night. He said in a rare move, NBC, ABC, fake news have both said that they would not cover this speech. They knew what it was about because of the fact that they don't like the topic because they know how corrupt the system is and they don't want to reveal it. They and others in the media are part of a plot. They want to continue this fraud for whatever reason. They want to keep it going. They want to protect the radical left. They can't have a great country, and that's true. You can't have a great country without free and fair elections. Fraud like this should mean a revocation of their licenses. Now, in that instance, President Trump would be talking about the entirety of the channel. NBC, ABC, CBS, those are broadcasting on public airways. And, of course, the FTC, Brendan Carr, would be the one who could revoke those licenses. If that were to happen, that would obviously be unprecedented, and that would cripple those companies. CNN, they're a cable news channel. Nobody gives a shit about CNN, and hardly anybody's tuning into that. But even people who, there are definitely still people out there who are watching CBS and NBC because, maybe they don't have cable and they think that they're getting news. So the Chinese government wanted the U.S. president to lose the next election, and the reason they wanted me to lose is because they knew I was wise to them, charging them billions and billions of dollars worth of tariffs and building the strongest military anywhere in the world. CIA reporting explicitly stated, and I quote, in mid-2018, the Chinese Communist Party's policy was to leverage all domestic and foreign elements that were opposed to the U.S. president in an effort to reduce the U.S. president's votes and make him resign or prevent his reelection, and influencing the 2018 midterms and influencing U.S. business leaders so they could turn them against the president and the United States of America and infiltrate the media. So today, I'm asking the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the CIA to investigate how and why such crucial information was hidden, fire those involved in the cover-up, and to file criminal charges, if appropriate, against these people. There are so many of these people in the military or the government where criminal charges would absolutely be appropriate. Now, here is John Solomon commenting briefly on those so-called journalists, because, of course, we need to learn their names. They need to be held accountable.
In one of the documents released last night, the Chinese government sought to identify U.S. journalists who had reported negatively on the U.S. president and pay them to write more negative articles about him.
Yep.
Are we ever going to get to a place where we will see names?
I've asked for that now. The commission just asked for that task force. So if there are any journalist names that they've confirmed, I hope we'll be able to make them public sometime soon.
Wow.
Now, at a minimum, and I said this last night, but at a minimum, every single journalist that accepted money, compensation from China to write negative stories about President Trump is guilty of failing to register as a foreign agent. Remember, that's what they went after Mike Flynn for. They've gone after a couple of different people, connected to Trump for doing the exact same thing, claiming that they were not registering properly. Hunter Biden did not register as a foreign agent, but of course he got away with it. But minimally speaking, each and every one of these people is guilty of FARA violations. And I can only imagine how many people in the mainstream media did this. Now, we also have hundreds of thousands of foreigners, illegal aliens that are currently registered to vote. This is obviously not the full number. This is a very small sample size that they were able to positively identify prior to President Trump's speech. The knowledge of all of these foreign illegal aliens on the voter rolls, of course, again, creates that consciousness of guilt for the 50 secretaries of states that Harmeet Dillon sent those letters to. Even more than that, they have 400,000 dead voters. Again, if you guys have been watching the show, you remember when we were going through all of those voter registration lists coming out of Michigan, where you had people born in the early 1800s still casting ballots. Every single election, casting ballots. 400,000 dead voters were found, nearly 300,000 illegal aliens, exactly 278,000 were on these voter rolls. And those were found as a part of the task force review by DHS. They looked at only 4 states. And this was, if you extrapolate that out, roughly 10 times that number could be extrapolated out to the rest of the United States. So we're talking millions of illegal aliens. We're talking, double that for dead people that are on the voter rolls right now. President Trump said hundreds of thousands of non-citizens and dead people are listed and active on the voter rolls, and yet we still have elections with no voter ID, no proof of citizenship, and tens of millions of ballots floating aimlessly through the mail. Now, exactly how many? Let's take a look. We have from Mark Wayne Mullen, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, these illegal aliens that they were able to identify were in the 4 states of California, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Nevada. It should be noted that all of those states are currently blocking the DOJ and DHS from getting their current voter registration lists. So these illegal aliens and dead people that they found were found through open source means, which again means that you're going to have far more people of these 2 categories that are on these voter rolls. And it's likely the reason that California, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Nevada do not want DHS and DOJ to get their hands on the current lists. And of course, he states the obvious. This shouldn't be a political issue. It's not blue. It's not a red issue. Every single state should only have Americans who are real, living, and actual bodies that are contributing to society able to elect American leaders. We have put these governors on notice. So now they have put the secretaries of state on notice, and they have also put the Secretary of State's bosses on notice, because this is no longer just an issue for the Secretary of State. The state government themselves are now also culpable for these illegal aliens and dead people being on the voter rolls. So this letter right here was written to the Secretary of State of California, Shirley Weber. We also, we've spoken about her. There are also nearly 1 million inactive voters that are on the voter rolls. In California, they found 190,832 non-citizens. As an example, they found 81,336 registrants for who the name, date of birth, address, and social security number match a non-citizen who is also in the files of the DHS. The most efficient way to ensure accuracy of our findings is to work collaboratively on identity verification. And that, again, would be through the use of that SAVE software that they have, which cross-references the state voter roll database along with the Social Security database and then the illegal alien database that they have. And this is certainly not something they want to do, because then they will have to admit that all of these people are on their voter rolls and they are probably voting. So let's jump over to Nevada. In Nevada, they found at least 15,903 non-citizens. And again, 8,576 of those people's name, date of birth, address, and social security number match a non-citizen on our files. Did you hear that, though? Because, I mean, if I say it quick enough, it just may not register. Non-citizens who have social security numbers. Haven't we been told that that's something that's not supposed to happen? Non-citizens don't get social security numbers. Oh, except, I guess, when they actually do. In New Jersey, they found 35,152 non-citizens. And again, 19,497 of those same registrants were people who the DHS is already aware of as having been in this country without status. And then we go to Pennsylvania, and they only found 14,576 non-citizens on the voter rolls, with 8,594 of them being in the same DHS database. Now, if we go here to the speech that Markwayne Mullin delivered this morning, he also wanted everybody to know that as part of the DHS task force, they are currently investigating early voting so that they can catch people who are non-citizens voting early, voting by mail, voting absentee, etc.
Our security team and CISA will release an updated election infrastructure plan, and it'll be public within 30 days, meaning that'll give the states the resources they need to help.
Green Ozone says, bullshit. The foreign students who came to work had to get a social security number in order to get paid. It's quite the system. So they're supposed to get a taxpayer identification number, which has the same number of digits as a social security number, but the structure of the number is different in that it denotes that it's not a social security number. It fits with the tax system so that it can be used in the same way, but it's not supposed to be a social security number. Those are supposed to be reserved for people and handed out based upon the state that they're born in. That's going to denote how that number starts out. A TIN is going to be a different format, but is immediately identifiable as not being a social security number.
From the cyber side. From us, if they participate in the SAVE program, we'll provide the resources and training to support state election integrity. We're not trying to change the outcome. We're trying to make sure that American people can trust our voting system. Real ID does not prove citizenship and does not give you the right to vote. You must be a U.S. citizen and you must be eligible to vote. Before and after the election, we will scrub all election records looking for illegal aliens and those who are ineligible to vote, including those that somehow voted, yet they were deceased.
So they're checking ahead of time. They're going to send people in to train and essentially teach the people of these states to make sure that we don't have these problems. And then after the election takes place, they're immediately going to look and see how many of these illegal aliens and dead people were still able to vote. Reminding you once again about that letter from Harmeet Dillon, the consciousness of guilt. Every single Secretary of State who has the same problem after the election as they had before the election is going to be guilty, will be criminally culpable. And if they don't want to put in the effort, then they're basically going to be putting themselves in prison.
If you're illegal and attempted to vote, or you tried to vote illegally for someone else, we will find you and we will charge you.
So this is also going to essentially put every single illegal alien on the radar of DHS to immediately have them go swept up, arrested, and then removed.
Illegal voter registration and illegal voting both carry penalties up to 5 years in prison and up to $250,000 in fines. We will pursue maximum pressure on this. To let you know, we will be proactively looking at early voting, and then after post-election, we will continue to scrub all those that did vote. Those states that don't participate with us, They have public records of those that voted, which is where we found the 250,000 from the 4 states that don't participate with us. We will go through those records one by one, and we will pursue everybody.
Every single person in state government who allows these people to vote and allows the fraud to continue are now officially going to be criminally penalized. Now, also, just like we need to have the accountability for every intelligence official who oversaw the secreting of this information from 2020, a lot of people are wondering about Chris Krebs and CISA. Chris Krebs, remember, he testified this was the most secure election in the history of the world and that there was no fraud anywhere. But now we know 100% that there was. So Kara Castronova had an opportunity to ask Mark Wayne Mullen whether or not Chris Krebs and CISA would be held criminally accountable.
Kara Castronova from Lynn's LTV, thank you so much for doing this briefing today. Is there any analysis on what went wrong with CISA in 2020 and the premature analysis that it was the most safe and secure election? It's now being revealed that obviously it was not. Will Chris Krebs or anybody that was involved in that premature analysis be held accountable?
Everybody that purposely misled the American people, abused their power and their authority, and decided not to continue doing their job will be held accountable. What does that accountability look like? I don't know. Is it criminal? We'll pursue criminal charges. If it is not criminal, we'll make sure you never work for the federal government again and you never have the ability to have a clearance again.
Now, if they did it intentionally, 100%, it is criminal. So the pursuit of those criminal charges obviously is going to result in the ultimate dispensation of that stuff that we hope to see. Now, as I said early on in the show, this is not the end of the reveal. There is more that is coming. And John Solomon, obviously being a major part of this, wants everybody to know that the stuff that's coming is going to be even worse.
The NSA has never before released these summary reports of their best raw intelligence that they believe. Very sensitive stuff. It identifies who's listening and who they're listening to and what they're doing and what they're intercepting. We kept all of the content things that, available for the public that would help you understand the story that the NSA had gotten from the intercepts without saying that they're listening to this guy on this date or at this station or using this technology. Now, there is some stuff about voter data breaches involving other databases, particularly that one that shows the 220 million. We're working with the intelligence agencies to get that unredacted because there's some other big data breaches that we should also be secured about that aren't even election related, but they affect our safety and our well-being, and we're working to get those things. So I think that version will get unredacted. Everything else in those NSA intercepts are all about, we were listening to this guy at this time, at this post, using this technology. That's not the stuff we want to give our enemies. Yeah.
So we don't want to give that to our enemies, but it will obviously be very helpful when it comes time to start those prosecutions. Do me a favor, please hit that like button, thumbs up, the heart, the red pill, whatever it might be. I would really appreciate it. And let me say one more time, thank you very much to the good folks over at Rumble. You guys, we hear a lot about crypto, but part of it might be that people don't understand exactly why it was created. It was because of the financial crisis of 2008. The whole thing was the idea that you need to control and take charge of your own money. And after that 2008 financial crisis, they designed Bitcoin as an alternative to banks. So instead of a bank holding onto your cash, delaying transfers, limiting access, it keeps you in control. And if you've ever had to wait for a transfer to clear, then you know exactly what that's like. Fast forward to today, everybody's heard about crypto, but getting started might feel a little bit complicated. This is why I love and use the Rumble wallet. It takes all the complexity out of it. It makes it simple. You choose what you want to work with, whether it's Bitcoin, dollar-backed stablecoins, or digital gold backed by real gold. It's not complicated to set up. It connects directly to MoonPay, so you can use your credit card, debit card, or your bank account, and you'll be up and running in just a couple of minutes. And then once you're set up, you can even support your favorite creators on Rumble, whether it's me or somebody else, and that support is direct. All of that money goes to them. So do this right now. Scan that QR code on screen, or if you're on Rumble, you can click the link in the description and then download the Rumble wallet. And then from there, you'll be up and running in no time. You tap buy and you're in the game. In just a few minutes, you go from hearing about crypto to actually owning some. If you're not on Rumble, you can go to wallet.rumble.com. Thank you very much to Rumble and Rumble Wallet. All right. So yesterday, Jon Ossoff, of course, was anticipating that President Trump was going to essentially claim that he was illegitimate. I believe Jon Ossoff is illegitimate, and I think that there's a distinct possibility that Jon Ossoff will not be reelected in November, in large part due to the cleanup of the election system in Georgia and the revelation of all of these details. Now, Jon Ossoff already said that he believed that President Trump declassifying all of this information related to the problems in our election system was misconduct. He said it's misconduct, presidential misconduct, to abuse the bully pulpit and to abuse intelligence authorities and declassification authorities. If indeed that's what he'll do tonight in order to pursue his sour grapes election denialism, trying to overturn an election that he lost 6 years ago. And I think that every elected leader in this country, Democrat or Republican, has an obligation to denounce this. Well, Jon Ossoff has a dog in this fight. Of course, he knows that if President Trump cleans up the election system, if President Trump does expose that he is an illegitimate candidate, well, then, of course, he's going to be up shit's creek. Now, Caroline Leavitt, of course, yesterday had declined to say whether or not somebody was going to be prosecuted. But again, I think it's pretty obvious from President Trump's statements last night, prosecutions will be coming as a result of this. Now, I would like to play for you this clip briefly, which was from Brookings County, South Dakota. This man, Rick Weibel, was given 5 minutes to present his findings to what I believe is the city council. And he details in less than 5 minutes how all of the concerns about election security are legitimate. And he basically proved to these people that the systems they were using could not be trusted, because as he was sitting there waiting for his turn, he was able to hack the election software and install it on a system that was insecure. Take a listen.
Or secure. And I'll just tell you flat out that it does conform to the certificate that is published by the EAC. 4 of our counties also have this same type of hard drive.
The Election Assistance Commission.
What I can show you immediately is that I was able to take a forensic copy of that hard drive and actually boot up the electionware system on a non-conforming laptop. That is a complete violation of the certificate, which required that the trusted platform module be enabled. It would be impossible normally for that hard drive to go off of a certified machine that is communicating with its chip to be able to boot up on here. And the other piece of evidence that I have of nonconformity is that you will notice that I have a thumb drive on the side of it. That thumb drive is a BitLocker key that is used to basically allow the security of the laptop to boot up. That is another violation, because what is supposed to happen is it should be on an official Delkin thumb drive that is supposed to be serialized and secure. So I've just given you 2 pieces of evidence. I've also shown another piece of evidence in other states that have published in lawsuits because their auditors and attorney generals and states attorneys did not do due diligence of publishing the manuals online in the court cases. Sheriff Stanek can confirm on page 10 of this manual, the default administrator user and password is publicly available on the internet. And I have that copy here, and I showed Sheriff Stanek page 10, and he can confirm that the password is there and not redacted. The other manuals for the complete system, including the DS200, 450, and 850, all of those passwords are available online as default. We're also aware that when C-Change was in charge of the elections during the last few years, the default password was election 1. And it was universal across all the states that they were operating in. Thankfully, we're using ES&S directly, and they should be changing those passwords. My recommendation is that the password should be different for each of the machines. Don't use the same password across the spectrum so that you can help delay it.
All right, so he basically handed them their ass, and this obviously is nothing new for us here in this chat. But because of President Trump's revelations last night, the truth of our completely illegitimate election system is now seeping into the public consciousness. And that will certainly take on a much different flavor when these people begin to be prosecuted, because that is the direction we must go. Thank you to Principled Enigma, who says, please don't forget to check the X chat I sent you. That is me, potentially big, I mean huge. Okay, sorry, I did forget to check X. And let me just get it pulled up real quick. Okay, so can you tell me what your name is on X? Because I have a lot of messages from people. And I don't know what your name is, and I've got so many messages. So if you could just drop in there what it is, because I'm not seeing anything that I can identify as being from you. Yeah, you're going to have to tell me what your name is, because I got too many messages. I don't know who it is. And then CK felt every voter list needs to be completely clean and everyone needs to re-register. Yeah, I mean, that's the direction that we're going. All right. There's obviously a number of different things that might happen as a result of President Trump revealing all of this information. He's giving everyone the opportunity to fix the problems. And during the course of those fixes, certainly it's going to lead to people being charged and people going to trial. But it may be, and he also, of course, is demanding that the Senate finally pass the Save America Act. That will address one single problem that we have with our illegitimate election system. JR and I were talking about it last night, and it may get to the point, if we get close enough to the midterms, that these states are refusing to take the actions that need to be taken. He may end up having to call some type of a national security emergency, declaring, because election infrastructure is critical national infrastructure, that perhaps we can't use election machines and people are going to have to go to paper ballots. The doors are quite literally limitless at this point in the directions that we can go. But I think from now until the midterms, it is going to be hot and heavy election stuff every single day. And we are going to be getting more revelations about the specific problems that exist in all of these different 50 states. Now, Karen Bass, let's go to elections in California. Karen Bass is once again facing backlash because she was defending the homeless drug addicts that are living in Los Angeles. And essentially, it's her contention that these people need drugs if they're going to stay sane, and that by doing meth and heroin, it's a good thing. Let me play this for you. And my light is dying. Okay. Karen Bass. Buckets of wisdom.
You sleep out on the street for a couple of weeks and tell me that you're not using something to stay sane, or use meth so that you don't go to sleep to protect yourself.
After the speech, we asked the mayor to clarify. You said that people are on the street using meth for protection?
Well, no. What I said is no. What I said is that I know that people have used meth to stay awake at night so they don't fall asleep because they're worried about being assaulted. Meth is not protection.
Okay, so yeah, obviously she has some pretty hot takes. Remember when she said that she wanted to give homeless drug addicts teeth so that I suppose they could fix their rotten teeth problem? There's a lot of obvious ways that you can deal with drug addiction and abuse, and every single bad way is what they do in California. Also, it turns out that Los Angeles spent $60 million on a plan that was put together by Nithya Raman, the woman who allegedly beat Spencer Pratt. The plan, obviously, was to spend this money, get homeless people off the street, and build new housing. At the end of that $60 million, it turns out that Nithya Raman's plan only brought about 3 housing units that were built from this $60 million. Where in the hell did that rest of that $60 million go? The $60 million was supposed to produce 2,000 apartments. Obviously, that didn't happen. Councilwoman Nithya Raman, she is the chair of LA's Council on Housing and Homelessness Committee, and she introduced this time-limited subsidy just back in September. It was supposed to be a cheaper alternative to Mayor Bass's Inside Safe program, and obviously they were going to use it, allegedly, to get homeless people off the streets. The plan was to lease and move homeless people into 2,000 apartments, subsidize their rent, rather than paying for them to stay in motels or shelters. Nearly a year after that plan was launched, $62.6 million in taxpayer funds were spent, and only 3 apartments were occupied. So the city council approved this last September as part of their strategy. 4 months later, on January 28th, the council approved resources for these redesigned programs targeting the 2,000 households, and only 3 units have been occupied as of June 25th, and the money, of course, is all gone. Now, also in California, this was great. Gavin Newsom's wife, who is the subject of a DOJ investigation, was questioned about the start of this investigation. We know that this investigation began under the Biden DOJ, and Gavin Newsom is positioning it as President Trump coming after him and then attacking his wife needlessly. But the majority of the investigation focuses on the activity of Gavin Newsom's wife. So MSDNC asks her about when this investigation began, and you can literally see her brain break.
But is it true that this investigation started during the Biden administration?
I don't know the details. I do know that, Trump was coming after my husband back when Biden was president and Biden was running for the presidency, and I thought it was ironic. So, look, this is a fishing expedition, and I think what you're saying is that it's just been going on for a long time. My husband is Trump's most outspoken critic, and he's the GOP's biggest. I don't know. They've always targeted my husband.
That was brutal, absolutely brutal to have to watch that. Democrats have another problem in Wisconsin. The lieutenant governor, Sarah Rodriguez, was running for the governor's race, but she just was forced to drop out. Apparently, there is some serious questions with her campaign finance reports, a scandal brewing so big that the only choice she had was to leave the race in humiliation. August 11th is the Democrat primary, and the Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez is now not going to be in it. She announced her exit early this morning after admitting that campaign finance scandals were rocking her bid to become a governor, and this will now just be an ongoing distraction. She can no longer afford to carry this into the primary because obviously they're going to be asking her a lot of questions about it. So a Milwaukee Journal Sentinel article reviewed her January campaign finance report, and they found more than $100,000 in apparent duplicate contributions. The same donor listed as giving the exact same amount on the same day, sometimes twice in one entry. Wow, this sounds a lot like Act Blue. Other reviews put the overstated totals even higher. One analysis suggests that there's maybe $275,000 in duplicate donations in December alone. Plus, the report itself, filed by the campaign, was late. They only filed it at 2:13 a.m. yesterday, January 16th. This was a couple of hours after the deadline. And then they amended it twice in the early morning hours at 3:23 a.m. and then again at 5:01 a.m., again, after they had already submitted it. Now, Rodriguez had been telling donors and the public that she had the resources for a $1 million ad buy, and she reportedly believed her campaign had about $1.5 million on hand. However, after these errors were uncovered, it turns out that her campaign had only about $200,000 in the bank. On Monday, she held a press conference where she called this fiasco a bump in the road, and she claimed she was taking swift accountability by firing her longtime campaign manager, Kara Spencer, in a desperate bid to shift the blame, and she contacted the Wisconsin Ethics Commission to file these amended reports. And she insisted voters should not worry about her ability to manage the state's $111 billion biennial budget. Of course. And by Friday, obviously, she was gone. The spin did not work. People did not believe her. In her announcement, she said, "I want to start by thanking my family and every single person who showed up for this campaign over the last week. Your support has meant much more than I can put into words. As we have continued to dig into our financial reports, it has become clear that there are issues that would be an ongoing distraction, not just for this campaign, but for the primary and for Wisconsin. The race is too important to let that happen. I am deeply hurt and betrayed by what happened. As I said on Monday, part of being a leader is taking swift action, doing the right thing, and being as honest as possible when there's a problem." So, of course, she immediately blames someone else and fires them and shifts any responsibility. "I got into this race because I wanted what was best for Wisconsin, and that hasn't changed. And because I believe that, I cannot in good conscience allow these questions to become a cloud over an election that Democrats need to win." Well, it'll still be a cloud, and the questions are still going to linger, and likely her political career in Wisconsin is over. As she said, Wisconsin deserves better. "This was never about any other race or any other candidate. This is about protecting Wisconsin from a legislature hell-bent on putting corporations over schools and insurance companies over patients. It's about showing the rest of the country that we can win here, govern here, and fight for the middle class, and that Wisconsin will lead the way." Well, just wait until they take a look at the voter rolls in Wisconsin and find out that there are not nearly as many Democrats as they have led people to believe. So Sarah Rodriguez also might possibly face criminal charges as a result of this. Also potentially facing criminal charges is the prosecutor who has just been ousted by the Missouri Attorney General. Why was she fired? Well, apparently she was having sex with defense teams and with their clients. Ray County Prosecuting Attorney Camille Johnston, right here, a Democrat, of course, is the subject of a quo warranto petition filed by the Missouri Attorney General Catherine Hanaway. Just when you think it can't get any worse, somebody like this broad shows up and says, "Hold my beer." So Attorney General Catherine Hanaway has filed this petition for a writ of quo warranto to remove Ray County Prosecutor Camille Johnson from her office after these explosive revelations of repeated intimate and romantic relationships with criminal defense counsel and defendants, including an illegal alien being prosecuted for sexual assault in her own jurisdiction. You know that you're in a good position when you start screwing the prosecutor. She's like, "Oh, baby, I'm going to let you off. Don't worry." So according to the petition, Johnston allegedly engaged in undisclosed romantic relationships with individuals whose criminal cases intersected with the Ray County Prosecutor's Office, including a defense attorney who represented criminal defendants in cases prosecuted by her office. The Attorney General alleges Johnson failed to recuse herself or seek the appointment of special prosecutor despite what the filing describes as obvious conflicts of interest. The petition further alleges Johnston maintained another romantic relationship with an individual charged with domestic violence and retaliated against a staff member who became aware of the relationship. She berated and yelled at the staff member for catching her screwing somebody who they were prosecuting. The filing claims Johnston failed to disclose the alleged conflict to victims, to court personnel, or to her office until a judge ultimately disqualified her from the case. Among the most serious allegations the Attorney General claims is that Johnston had a prior intimate relationship with a man identified in the petition as JG, who was allegedly under investigation for felony sexual offenses. So maybe he was a rapist, maybe he was a kitty diddler, we don't know. The filing alleges Johnston knew of this investigation, failed to recuse herself, withheld information regarding his whereabouts to authorities, assisted him after he absconded from Ray County, and then later took a vacation with this sexual assaulter. The petition also states the individual was allegedly in the United States illegally and was later arrested in Ohio, where he currently remains awaiting trial on other felony charges. These are allegations contained in the Attorney General's filing and have not been adjudicated in court. But you know what they say, where there's smoke, there's fire. She also says that this woman was a real see you next Tuesday at work. She created a hostile work environment by intimidating and berating employees, fostering what the petition describes as an atmosphere of fear within the prosecutor's office. And based on these allegations, the AG argues Johnston may have violated Missouri statutes relating to public corruption and hindering prosecution, and contends that her conduct constitutes willful neglect of office and duty requiring her removal from that office. A judge has already approved a preliminary order immediately removing Johnston pending the full outcome of the case. This woman is probably also going to lose her law license. She's definitely not going to be the prosecutor any longer, and she will likely face criminal conduct herself. All right. Now, we also have learned that the DNC's financial situation may be even more dire than it appears. Right now, they are basically sitting in negative dollar categories. The DNC chair, Ken Martin, apparently knew how bad this looked, and he forced Democrat officials to sign non-disclosure agreements before he allowed them to view just how bad the party's finances were. Now, this is according to Axios. It's been widely reported for months that the DNC is struggling to raise money. Donors are not exactly lining up to hand over cash to a party that blew through $2 billion in a matter of weeks in 2024, only to come up with not winning the election. And now, of course, since USAID is effectively over, there's no money flowing from the NGO industrial complex into the pockets of Democrat politicians. So, why would this man make party leaders sign NDAs to simply view the checkbook? There's a lot of red flags here. So the DNC and its leadership team were signing non-disclosure agreements before a recent meeting about the finances. Two people familiar with the matter have told Axios. This move, which is a total break in norms from prior practices of officers of viewing the finances of the Democrat Party, shows just how badly Ken Martin and his sensitivity about the money woes the DNC is facing are affecting him, as well as the persistent criticism about his leadership. Personally, I think he's doing a great job. Continue doing what you're doing, Mr. Martin. So we don't know how badly the finances are, but we do know that the DNC has publicly had roughly $15 million on hand. However, they are $18 million in debt. So effectively, they have negative $3 million to work with. And the RNC has got $125 million on hand, but no debt. So Martin has been privately and publicly defensive about the party's finances, and people close to him are saying that he's simply not dealing with it very well. Let me say thank you very much to NX17, who says your work is appreciated. Thank you, RP. Much love. Thank you to you. Thank you to Sean Joe for a can, 3 cookies. Thank you to Filter Dog, who says Paul Pelosi has officially been charged with hit and run after he smacked into a parked Tesla with his Maserati and drove off. That is great to know. Finally, Paul Pelosi getting his comeuppance. And then Sean Joe, thank you for the cookie as well. I appreciate you. All right. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Alan Dershowitz has suddenly refused to sit down with the House panel over the Epstein relationship, likely because he will be under oath this time. He was planned for an interview as part of the House committee's probe into the Epstein files, and Dershowitz is now declining to come in. He, of course, previously represented Jeffrey Epstein, and he spent years fending off allegations that he, too, was engaging in the abuse of young women, including the late Virginia Giuffre. And, of course, Virginia later recanted her accusations before her death, but there could be any number of reasons why she would do that. Now, the oversight probe has interviewed a number of high-profile individuals, including the Clintons, Leon Black, one of Jeffrey Epstein's largest financial benefactors, and the FBI has, of course, attracted scrutiny over their botched handling of this entire situation. I would suspect that Alan Dershowitz's only reason for not testifying in this particular inquiry is because the knowledge of the Epstein operation is so broad at this point. So many people know about Jeffrey Epstein's crimes, and they also will know that Alan Dershowitz will be testifying under oath, and so his testimony may likely differ from things he said publicly in the past. So now the only thing that the committee can do is to subpoena him, compel him to come in and testify. And if he does, we may get a whole bunch of pleadings of the fifth. All right. Now, before we close out for the day, I want to give you guys a little bit of satisfaction and tell you about a couple of cases of illegal aliens being arrested and, of course, on their way to be deported. A woman at Boston's Logan Airport was just arrested after a concert. She's an illegal alien, but she's been here in the country illegally since she was 4 years old. Apparently, Logan Airport has become a major hotspot for ICE to arrest these illegal aliens. Another interesting part of her case is that even though she's an illegal, she has a social security number. I wonder if they're going to find out that she's actually voted in elections.
30s, who has been in this country since she was 4, is now tonight in federal custody in Burlington, Vermont. ICE arrested her at Logan Airport after she came to town for a concert. And that's not the only ICE arrest at Logan this month, drawing scrutiny from advocates. Our Ariel Metropolis is live at Logan right now. Ariel?
No, it's not, Ed. Actually, 2 people were arrested here at Logan on Friday, and their attorney tells us that they have a right to stay in this country.
Patrick, every time the FBI arrests these pedos, we talk about it on this show. So I am not the guy who only talks about Jeffrey Epstein. It's just that I've been aware of Jeffrey Epstein and his network since longer than most of the people that you're going to see talking about it. So believe me, every single pedophile arrest and takedown that I can talk about, I do. Kash Patel has been doing a great job.
32-year-old Maria Rosales traveled to Boston from Florida last week to be among the crowds watching local star Noah Kahan.
So she's in a color guard, and they decided, let's go to Boston, let's go to Fenway Park and go see a Noah Kahan concert.
But when she tried to fly back to Miami on Friday, her attorney says she was picked out by ICE and detained at Logan Airport.
This is probably the 15th case I've been dealing with in the last year where people get ambushed at Logan International Airport. She wasn't traveling internationally.
Her lawyer, Todd Pomerleau, says she's been living in this country since she was 4 years old, was a DACA recipient, and was waiting on her paperwork to be renewed.
Last I checked, 4-year-olds don't pick and choose the countries they go to. And she's been living here. She's had a work permit. She's had a social security number. She has a job. Works for a dermatologist treating people with skin cancer.
According to Pomerleau, that same day, another man, 33-year-old David Ardilla, was taken into custody at Logan after he traveled from Seattle for a World Cup game. He says Ardilla is a DJ with a social security number and work permit who came to the U.S. seeking asylum from Venezuela.
He applied for asylum back in 2017, nearly a decade ago. He still hasn't had an interview for an asylum application.
Pomerleau is now fighting to get both of his clients out of ICE custody.
In our view, that's a massive due process violation.
DACA was rescinded, and so was the protection for Venezuelans. So it doesn't matter what status they had. Neither of them have status to be here in the United States legally at this time.
Now, we did reach out to immigration officials tonight. At this point, we have yet to hear back, but we've heard repeatedly from President Donald Trump and members of his administration that one of his top priorities is securing the border and deporting those who are here illegally.
Oh, that's a bummer. We also have a case out of Alaska. It would appear that the Biden administration was allowing Chinese migrants to become employees in government. In this instance, a state lawyer for the state of Alaska, Zhu Zhang Charlie Yang, was just arrested and will be deported by the Trump administration.
Thank you so much for joining us. Our top story tonight, U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement spokesperson says officers arrested Shusheng Charlie Yang, a 32-year-old Chinese national and...
Say that 5 times fast. Shusheng Charlie Yang, Shusheng Charlie Yang, Shusheng Charlie Yang.
...attorney with Alaska's Department of Law. The arrest happened last Friday in Anchorage. An ICE spokesperson told us Yang violated the terms of his admission and is a, quote, deportable alien. Yang is being held at the Northwest ICE Processing Center in Tacoma, Washington. ICE says it's pending immigration proceedings. Alaska court records show Yang pleaded no contest to a speeding ticket from May 22nd, but I could not find any other charges listed against him in any of the state court systems. In response to general...
Doesn't matter. Don't need it. He definitely, by getting that ticket, made himself ineligible to remain.
Questions about verifying employment eligibility for full-time hires. The Alaska Department of Administration Policy Advisor Kate Sheehan told me that the state of Alaska hires individuals who have the legal right to work in the United States. This employment eligibility is confirmed through a federally mandated I-9 verification process. You're probably familiar if you've ever had a full-time job in the U.S. The Department of Law and Governor Mike Dunleavy's office declined to comment on Yang's employment status or arrest due to personnel policy. We're trying to reach out to Yang while he remains detained in Tacoma through several different channels, and we will continue to update you on this story as we learn more. Thank you so much for joining.
Enjoy your trip on the boat back to China. All right, now, well, one little story about fraud. Take a look at this.
It was a bizarre attempt.
What we have here is a couple of church ladies who decided that fraud tourism would be a great way to grift some cash off the U.S. government.
It was a bizarre attempt to shield our cameras from getting video of an unlikely pair of fraudsters. 46-year-old Candace Langley and 62-year-old Cynthia Allen are friends from church who hatched a conspiracy.
The two church ladies are so-called fraud tourists, part of 5 people from Philadelphia accused of coming here to Minnesota and stealing millions. Did you guys cook up this fraud scheme in Sunday school?
The fraud scheme? Billing millions to Minnesota's Medicaid-funded Housing Stabilization Services, or HSS program, claiming to help homeless clients like Terrence Darby, who was living in a shelter, find a home.
She billed your Medicaid at least $1,600. For what? What do you think the help they gave you was actually worth?
0. I mean, I didn't get anything.
Langley, an Essence magazine curvy model, and Allen, a Netflix actress and missionary, opened HSS companies in Minneapolis after hearing it was easy money. And for a while, it was, as they faked client records and inflated billing, pocketing $3.4 million.
Miss Allen, do you believe this was missionary work you guys were doing here in Minnesota?
No comment for our cameras, but in federal court, in front of a judge, they each had one-word comments. Guilty to the charge of conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud. Solano Simmons is their attorney.
Where both clients were able to accept responsibility for the actions that they took.
2 of their church friends from Philly, a Chanel suspenders-wearing pastor named Lester Brown.
Reverend Brown, how do you reconcile your faith and your fraud?
Reverend!
And a Christian University president with a flair for fashion and fancy rides named Dr. Anthony Jefferson.
How much did that coat cost?
Had already pleaded guilty to stealing their own millions through the scheme. Langley and Allen admitted guilt and will be sentenced at a later date. With their entourage trying to impede our cameras, they were escorted into a waiting Lexus and whisked away.
They came to Minnesota looking for easy money. They're leaving facing hard time. I'm Carol Levin, investigative reporter.
So yes, the concept of fraud tourism is a rather new invention just in the last couple of years, when people learned that it was just so easy to go to Minnesota, open up a company, defraud the government, get paid millions of dollars. There were people like these ladies coming from all over the country, not just Somalians, not just migrants, but American citizens who were probably grifting no matter where they lived. Thank you to Principled Enigma. He says, I am Principled Enigma everywhere. Okay, I didn't see. I'll search for it. And then he says, here's what really blows my mind about you, Zach. It's how many times you say something that I would have said. almost exactly, word for word. It's a mind blower. We need to talk. And he says, yin yang with Lo Wang. And then Hugh Man. Oh, Hugh, what's good to see you, buddy? Good to see you. Thank you for yet another great deep dive, Zach. Big mosh up on Tuesday, July 21st at 2 p.m. Faraz Modad from Podcast of the Lotus Eaters. Oh, shit. That's going to be great. He's going to be joining Ghost of Base Patrick Henry on Badlands Media Geopolitics. That will be a must listen. I can't wait to hear that. And then I believe that's it. It is Principled Enigma. Okay, great. Finally, over here on Pilled, thank you to Sean Joe for the cookie. All right, you guys, I will be live tonight at 10:30 on Only Lands over there on Badlands Media. So if you feel like joining me and the crew, please come on over. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of laughs and we'll have a whole bunch to talk about. Other than that, I have an interview that's going to be dropping tomorrow at 5 p.m. And then on Sunday, I'm definitely going to be playing some video games with JR. JR and I are going to have our debut on the video game stream. So feel free to join. Otherwise, if I don't see you this weekend, then I sincerely hope to see you on Monday at 5 p.m. for a regularly scheduled episode of Red Pill News Live. Until that time, good luck and God bless. We'll see you guys.